The film opens with a temporal agent seeking to catch the famed terrorist known as the Fizzle Bomber, who set a bomb in a building with the intention of killing hundreds of people. The agent is successful in confining the device, but he suffers terrible injuries when his face is partially exposed to the following explosion. The Fizzle Bomber escapes, and the temporal agent returns to his timeline in the future, with the assistance of an unknown individual using a coordinate transformer field kit, a time machine. Returning to 1992, the agent awakens to find that he has had face surgery to save his life. Doctors grafted on new skin and rebuilt the agent's face and throat, which had been severely wounded. During this time, it is revealed that the agent works for the Temporal Bureau, a mysterious organization that sends temporal agents through time to prevent major crimes that would cost the lives of thousands of people. The Fizzle Bomber is also responsible for killing 11,000 people in New York in March 1975. Once the agent is healed, he is assigned a final task before being retired from the agency. The agent accepts the task, travels back in time to 1970 using his coordinate transformer field kit, dressed as a violin case, and works as a bartender in New York. The bartender appears to be waiting for a certain customer, with whom he begins speaking. This client, a guy, is known as the Unmarried Mother because he publishes confession magazines, many of which are probably written from the perspective of an unmarried mother. When the Unmarried Mother and the bartender start talking, the Unmarried Mother bets a bottle of liquor that his narrative will shock or surprise the bartender. According to the Unmarried Mother, he was initially a girl who was put into an orphanage on September 13, 1945, when she was abandoned at the institution's doorway. One of the orphanage staff gave her the name Jane. The Unmarried Mother recalls experiences from his childhood, claiming he envied youngsters with parents and thought he was odd in some way. He also claims to be brilliant and talented in all scientific subjects, as well as physically powerful enough to fight boys. The Unmarried Mother tells the bartender that she wanted to join the Space Corps to aid and serve astronauts. Jane performed well in all of the Space Corps' examinations, but she was rejected during the selection process because physicians discovered a medical abnormality during her physical, showing that Jane had an intersex disorder in which he or she has two sets of sex organs, male and female. However, the physicians do not inform Jane of this, and she attempts to resume her life. Jane finally enrolls in night school in Cleveland to improve her manner and attractiveness. But on her walk home on April 3, 1963, she runs into a stranger. The two begin communicating and quickly form a connection. The Unmarried Mother tells the bartender that the two fell in love and that she thought she had found the only person she genuinely cared about. But the stranger eventually left Jane and never returned. Jane is emotionally distressed when she is contacted by Mr. Robertson, who is mistaken for one of the Space Corps' recruitment agents and informs her that he actually works for a separate group that could use someone with her brains and athletic qualities and gives her a chance to join. Jane is about to accept his proposition, but falls pregnant from when she was with the stranger. Jane ultimately gives birth to a baby girl, but the baby must be removed through C-section. One of the physicians who did the procedure then tells Jane that they had to surgically remove her uterus and ovaries during the operation, but because they discovered male sex parts intact, they medically reassembled Jane into a man. An unknown stranger kidnaps Jane's child. With more procedures, Jane is totally recreated as a male. According to the Unmarried Mother, he became a writer and began producing confession stories under the pen name The Unmarried Mother as his life progressed. The Unmarried Mother concludes the story and asks if he has earned the bottle of liquor. The bartender almost hands him the bottle, but suddenly discloses that he is familiar with the Unmarried Mother's new male name, John, as well as other aspects about John/Jane's life. John ultimately follows the bartender into the bar's basement. The bartender informs John that he works for Mr. Robertson and that the organization mentioned by Mr. Robertson is the Temporal Bureau. The bartender then offers John the opportunity to kill the man who wrecked his life with no consequences provided he accepts to be recruited into the Temporal Bureau thereafter. John accepts and they travel back in time to April 3, 1963, in Cleveland, Ohio. The bartender gives John a revolver and tells him where and when to find the man who seduced, pregnant, and abandoned Jane. When John arrives at Cleveland College, he meets Jane, his younger female self, while the bartender/temporal agent watches from a distance and finally uses his time machine to travel into the future. The agent winds up at the same building in New York as he did at the start of the film, only he arrives a few minutes sooner to stop the Fizzle Bomber. He spots the Fizzle Bomber and battles him, but is knocked out in the process. He then awakens to the sound of an explosion and gunshots, realizing that his prior self, from the beginning of the film, has been injured and that he was unable to stop the bomber. He is shown to be the one who assists his past self in reaching his time machine and returning to the Temporal Bureau in 1992. The temporal agent travels back in time to March 1964, when he meets with Robertson. The agent was able to extract evidence from the Fizzle Bomber's explosive and deliver it over to Robertson. It is shown that Robertson and the agent are conversing in the hospital ward where Jane's kid is born. The temporal agent then kidnaps the infant and transports her to the same orphanage where Jane grew up in 1945. The temporal agent quickly returns to 1963 to rescue John and confesses his goal and why he arranged for John and Jane to meet. The temporal agent says that he, John, Jane, and the kid are all the same person who exists due to a time paradox. He informs John that he needs John's presence in order for Jane to become pregnant and give birth to a kid who would someday grow up to be them. None of them would exist if the time agent had not taken the infant and sent her back to 1945, or if he had not set up John and Jane. John expresses his reluctance to leave Jane, but the temporal agent urges on it. In 1985, the time agent delivers the unmarried mother, John, to the Time Bureau to assure his own survival so that he can prevent future crimes, and is deactivated. Robertson also hands over a file containing fresh leads gleaned from the material he supplied Robertson. The temporal agent / bartender / future John then returns to his own timeline, attempting to live a regular life in January 1975 New York. He then attempts to deactivate his time machine, but it meets an issue and fails to do so effectively. Using the information provided by Robertson, the agent / future John quickly deduces where to find the bomber. The agent ultimately tracks down the bomber in a laundry. To his surprise, the agent discovers that the Fizzle Bomber is actually him in the future. The Fizzle Bomber claims that his efforts have saved more lives than they have taken, and that Robertson is setting them up. The Fizzle Bomber, who appears mad, claims that if the agent kills him, the agent will become him since it is a repeated cycle. But if the agent loves him again when he was Jane and John, they would be able to stop the pattern. The agent, disgusted with his future self, decides to murder the Fizzle Bomber. The movie ends with the agent overlooking the time machine, stating that he knows for sure that Jane, John and himself were the best things that have happened to him in his life, and that he misses his past selves dreadfully.